People like to say that quality is about three things: good management, good genetics, and good animal health. We've talked a lot about management and genetics so far. Now it's time to talk about the linchpin, and that's animal health. We get this wrong, and all the good work we do in genetics, management, and the creation of quality is for naught. Joining us on the stage today are Kenny Knight, a feed yard operator from Kansas, Jim Wilson, a commercial rancher from Thermopolis, Wyoming, and Bronk May from Simplot Feeders in Idaho. Each of these gentlemen have been featured in the Story of a Steak series, and we're very happy to have you here. Let's welcome them to Kansas City. I'm sure everybody in our audience would be interested in your part of the story of a steak, and so we'll just go down the line, ask each of you to share a little bit about your background and the operation you're involved with and your engagement with the cattle business.
We have a farming feeding operation, about a 13,000 head feed yard. The Story of the Steak came along. They asked me for a rancher name that they could contact that we could tie this together. Well, my favorite rancher is on the other end down here, Jim Wilson, and so we've been buying his calves and some of his neighbors' calves for a long time, and so it's not all that hard to talk about.
Yes, I'm Bronk May, Simplot at Grandview. We're a large family-owned operation. We have 16 ranches. We're the second largest cow-calf producer in the United States. We have 2 feed yards. We're probably the 6th largest. And we have lots and lots of farm ground. One of my best customers that feeds lots and lots of cattle with me was Riverbend Ranches. And we got together with Merck and kind of put a joint together, and I think the story came out real well.
I'm Jim Wilson, and I think the story of a steak kind of starts at the V Ranch, and we take a lot of pride in what we put together over the years. My wife and I had a dream, and it started with purchasing land in the 80s, and that land was lost due to, what things were like in the 80s, high interest rates, and we weren't smart enough to realize that we could have went broke too. But we started buying land, and we've been purchasing land since then until about '06 was the last land that we purchased. But we made that land work on the production of a cow. And we take pride that we've been able to put that together, because I think most of you realize how difficult that would be. We do not raise cows, we raise grass. We think the best way to harvest that grass is with a cow. And we've made that work, and we're fortunate to be involved with Knight Feed Yard, and the cattle go from our operation to Knight's. We get all the information, and hopefully, more than anything else, they're also profitable for Knight's. But I think I'm living the dream.
Well, to get us kicked off, let's talk about the basics of your animal health programs and the approach you take. You might just share a little bit about how each of your enterprises views the establishment of an animal health program, the role of vaccines and wormers, etc., but maybe the big integrated picture of how you view animal health as part of your overall management system would be of value.
We use pretty standard vaccination program on the calves. The calves that we get from Jim and his area, they use a vaccination program that kind of fits our needs, and the important part of that is that they kind of give them 2 rounds of shots, and the last one being at least 2 weeks before shipment. We don't stipulate what brand of drug, but we want them vaccinated. And we do that with, we've got some cows of our own in the Flint Hills. We do exactly the same thing, except we wean our own calves on the ranch. But when those calves get to us, even though they've had 2 rounds of shots, we do it again. And we'll do the worming and the implanting, unless they're specific program cattle. We'll implant them and go from there. Our death loss is pretty low coming out of the ranch calves coming out of Wyoming, Montana.
We have different protocols for different types of cattle. Ranch calves, whether they're high risk or not. Yearlings, whether the yearlings are high risk or not. Basically, on our calf program, we use a IBR PI3, 2 strains of BVD and BRSV, and then we'll 8-weigh the cattle, worm, tag, implant. And we are not set up definitely to booster. We let the cattle tell us if we need to booster. And we've been averaging on our ranch calves, there's like 26,000 of them that's been in there in about 45 days. And we've been averaging less than 11% pulls, mostly down below 5% pulls. So we let the cattle tell us. We try to get them prepared. And one of the main things that I like my customers or people that are going to feed cattle, the mineral program is very important. If that animal does not have the immune system, which the minerals produce, then it's not going to respond to any of your vaccines anyway. So we're real big pushers of mineral programs out on the ranch for the cow and the calves.
We think the cow is our factory. If the factory isn't ready to produce, she won't have a good calf. We have to have a coupon, which we call the calf. If the calf isn't heavy enough, the cow is eliminated from the program. So we think that the success of a calf starts with the cow before she's even bred. So we think condition is number one, a good vaccination program, a good worming program for that cow is needed. Being we run on grass all year long, we really want to take care of that cow. At branding time, we vaccinate the calf, and we are very, very particular on where we vaccinate and how we vaccinate. And too many times that's the job that someone gets that can't do anything else. So we think we put our best person on the vaccination. And then we also, which takes quite a bit of time and quite a bit of effort, we try to precondition that calf 2 to 3 weeks prior to shipment. Also, that information is put on the envelope when that truck leaves, and it's sent to night feed yard, and so they have that information, what we did and when we did it.
I'm intrigued by the notion of you can give a vaccine, but there are other things that may or may not affect whether that vaccine's effective. You might talk a little bit more about the role of specific minerals, nutrition programs, and also the role of animal handling and animal stress prior to and during shipment, and how that might affect a health management protocol.
Well, obviously, the less stress on the calves, the less health issues we have. We try to be very careful with using trucks that the drivers are trained. Most of the time when we're coming that far, we put chips in the trailer and handle the cattle as comfortably as possible. Our people at the feed yard and the trucks have been trained to not use hot shots. We've got a cattle handling protocol through our progressive beef program that we adhere to, and I think that's got an awful lot to do with the health.
We like to have the cow in great shape so that she can conceive. And then the mineral program we think is awful important all through her time of carrying the calf. And then if the animal's right and she gives the right colostrum for that calf when he hits the ground, and that calf jumps up and suckles within the first 6 hours, we feel that calf has got a good start. But we really stress that cow's got to have everything done and done right. And then before we wean the calf, we vaccinate it branding too. But when we wean the calves, we always ask that the creels are watered down so that we don't have the dust. And we try to get the calves in as soon as possible and through the processing barn within the first 24 hours. We think that's very important. We like to know if the cattle are short of copper, selenium, zinc, and then we can do something at the feed yard to kind of help do that. You force feed all of those minerals to the animals, but it takes 30, 45 days for it to get into their system. So we may have to do something special. We try to look at each set of calves and come up with a protocol that'll work the best on that set of calves. And if we've had them year after year after year, we know what them protocols are.
I think our weaning program starts in August. We pull our bulls after 60-day breeding period. At that time, we will sex our calves on the mountain, a horseback on a fence line. It might take us 2 or 3 days. And then the next step is we select our replacement heifer calves on the cow at that time. That's a job that either my daughter or myself are there. And for you ladies, I want you to know that 2 years ago, she did all the selection herself, and that's the best conception rate we've ever had on our first calf heifers. So she does a very good job there. But that takes a portion of our heifers out, and we'll keep probably 60 to 70% of them. And then when we head off the mountain, we will take our steer pairs as one group and our heifer pairs as another group. For the simple reason is that the day that we ship, we'll bring the steers in, cut those off, weigh them, and are loading those cattle on the truck and get them out of our hands. And the quicker they get to the feed yard, the better off. Then we bring the heifers in and do the same thing with them. And I think the longer that we stress them there, the more stress they'll have on the truck and head down the road. I think that as I brokerage some cattle as well, that if I pull up to a ranch and there's an extreme abundance of help there, the more stress that is on the cattle. And on our own operation, we're really particular about how many people we have and who is in what position where. And I think doing that eliminates some of the stress on the cattle as well.
So Jim, you talked a little bit about the importance of having your best hands actually doing the vaccination, and so there's a training element in all of that. You might all just talk through a little bit how you actually train people in your enterprises and how you make sure that things are done the right way in all the animal health protocols you're using.
At night feed yard, we use a consulting veterinarian, and they go through a training every few months just because we forget. And we've got some of our longtime employees are probably as good as I have ever seen in placement, cleanliness, doing everything right. And I think that makes a tremendous difference.
We're fortunate at Simplot that we're a large organization and we have 2 in-house vets. And we have Monday morning meetings with the cowboys, and we're always meeting with the processing crew. And we send them through a training before they can work for us. And then we have our own trucking company. So the truck drivers are sent through a training program, how to load cattle, low stress, how to be in the right position. And we're always putting on a school once or twice a year for all of the employees. And I think that really, really pays dividends. We have some of the bud boxes, so you got to teach people how to use a bud box. They're great if you know what you're doing. They're horrible if you don't. We try to work with the flow of our cattle, processing, re-implanting, and I think it pays big dividends.
We took a little different angle of processing calves at branding. We used to rope and brand all our calves that way. I'm a roper, and I enjoy that. We didn't think it was fair to the cattle and the stress that you put on the cattle. So we quit that, and we went to a hydraulic calf table. And with that, our crew is smaller. We know that if we have a problem in any area, if it's vaccination, castration, or whatever, that we know who that individual was. So we're careful there. It's a lot cleaner. It's a lot quicker. We reduced our number of cattle that we do at one time, and we try to do them in groups of 50, maybe 51. You can get 51 doses out of a 51-dose bottle. So we think that saved us a little bit there. But we are way more comfortable. The calf is back on its mother, nursing, and we think we have a lot better job of processing the calf. One thing I would say is that when BQA started, the hardest people to train to vaccinate in the neck area was the older people. They'd been taught, including myself, to give that shot back there in the rump in the highest choice meat there was. And they were really difficult. You had to keep reminding them. We have our best luck with a young person as long as we explain how to do it, where to give it, and we've had a lot better results.
You know, the role of the veterinarian sometimes becomes just when we have a crisis, we call the vet, and that's the wholesale of our relationship. What advice might you give people how to use a veterinarian and how to get the most out of that relationship and how to establish that and what value a vet can potentially bring to your total enterprise?
Well, at our place, our consulting vet does more consulting than he does vet work. We can call him anytime if we've got a little flare-up somewhere, and while he's on the premises, which is only once a month, he'll work with the guys and so forth. But he's mostly used as he'll lay out some written guidelines, and we try to follow them.
Like I said, we have 2 vets on staff that's there all the time. I think they really make a big point to the people with them being there watching them. When we do our processing, we have an animal and it shows what shots are going where, and whoever gives them has to put their initial on it so that we can come back and we can check. But our vets set up some really good programs for us. And if you're a small producer, I think you need to listen to get you a local vet, get you a relationship. He can at least give you advice on what's working, what's not working. He can do some things for you that you're having to guess at yourself. And it's a good relationship to have a vet on call for you.
I think for those of you who saw the story of the steak, the first version of it, our vet is on there, and you can tell he's part of our team. I have him on speed dial on my phone. My men do. He's a family friend. He consults us all the time. We take, besides doing all the livestock work, the preg tests, and he tells us what vaccines to use, who has a problem somewhere in the area that we need to be keeping an eye on. He takes care of our dogs. He takes care of our horses. He's part of our team. And I think that one thing that I would suggest for, like Bronx said, the small producer that needs to sell their product, if they have a good relationship with their vet, those vaccines that go out or given to that animal, that information needs to be passed along to that buyer and onto the feedlot. And pretty soon, those feedlots know more about your cattle than sometimes you do. They, in return, will call that buyer and say, where did this set of cattle come from? We want them back because they were extremely healthy. If they're not healthy leaving, they're not going to be healthy when they get there. We take a lot of pride in the health of our cattle.
We got a mic here, there we go. As our industry's continued to coordinate and develop more of a supply chain mentality, record keeping and the transfer of information likely becomes more and more important. As we heard earlier this morning from Lowell Catlett, that could ramp up to almost unimaginable levels. How do you view record keeping, the capture, transfer, and utilization of information, and how did you create a culture in your organizations where record keeping was valued not only by management, by the people who work with you on your crews?
Well, the record keeping's part of it. We like to start with, as Jim alluded to, he brokers quite a few cattle, and we buy quite a few of those cattle, and gives us some advantages by buying the same cattle year after year. Cattle don't all feed the same, they don't all finish the same, but with using the same cattle as many times as we can, we've got a pretty good idea of how to handle them. And like Jim said, the vaccinations pass with the cattle, and then we've got those on record in every file.
Record keeping is a big part at Simplot Land and Livestock. We've got history for the last 20 years. Everything at the yard is computerized, high technology. The record keeping at the feed yard is very important, because when we doctor one, we got to be sure we're within the guidelines of the USDA, and when that animal goes to ship, we got to make sure there has no withdrawals. We like to get as much information as we can from cattle that we buy, and if you're a stocker out there and we buy your calves every year, there's a reason. If you have a different buyer every year, there's a reason. So we try to keep as much data on hand, go back and look before we go to the sales, before we know the cattle that we're going to do. And then, of course, all of our own cattle, we've got all the history on them. And I think data is very important. I also try to pass the performance data, which is health, death loss, conversions, gains, back to the rancher if he really wants it. But it's a group data, and if he's a small man, there may be more than one group in there. And if he wants individual data and willing to pay for it, we will also furnish that, but it costs about $7 to get it from the packers.
In our record keeping, we have what we call a branding book. Every set of cattle that we brand, before we vaccinate, we write the dosage, the serial number, and the lot number down. For the simple reason that that person that does that, if they write it down, they know what they're giving. The other reason is we've all had reactors. For some reason, if we have a reaction, we know where that came from. We think that's really important. If we happen to doctor any calves during the summertime, our guys always carry what we call an IRM red book. I'm sure some of you have those. The date is put in there and the number of the calf. Not all our calves are tagged. They will be tagged if they're doctored.
Let's talk a little bit about the economic impact of good animal health and a strong preventative and integrated management program versus the wrecks, the cattle that come in pretty green and naive. What's the overall economic impact you see in the difference between cattle that are healthy and cattle that are less well performing in terms of their morbidity and mortality rates?
Well, there is a tremendous difference in the value of those cattle. And the reason we go back time after time after time is because we recognize that value. We know which cattle cause problems and which ones don't, and we really try hard to stay with the cattle that we know. And I don't know if this is the time to say this or not, but one thing that bothers me is we have so many producers that maybe have 50 cows or 75, and I don't know what that number is across the nation, but it's a big percentage of our cows are in small herds. And we don't have the opportunity to buy those most of the time except out of the sale barn. I guess if I had a choice, I might suggest to the Angus Association to create some kind of a deal where those cattle could be bunched and put together, and so we could buy those cattle at a little better price than we'll give for them at the sale barn. And that would help us, it would help the producer, and that's my sales pitch on that.
The economical put through on cattle that you doctor is phenomenal. You know, you're going to lose 4, 5, 6, 10 days of performance. A lot of them cattle will never catch back up, especially if they're a yearling type of animal. If you're only feeding him 120 days and you hold him back for 10 of those days, you know, that's a big percentage of his feeding time. So it's going to cost you a lot of money from performance. We try not to, we know what commingling does, so we try not to commingle because the cost that is associated with it would be, you know, maybe 15% pulls versus 55% pulls. And it kind of showed us on all the research and everything that we do there, if we have to doctor an animal, he drops down to about 50% whether he's going to grade or not after we have to doctor him, because it just takes so much out of that animal. So there is a very, very big economical impact of cattle that you don't have to doctor. So we try to do our best we can, but when you're large and you have to buy cattle, you just got to deal with it the best you can. So you set up protocols, try to medicate in the feed. You try to do a lot of things to keep from having as few as 6 as possible.
It's pretty difficult to talk about economic impact on the market that we have today. And I think that a lot of these good producers that are out there that load lots of cattle realize that maybe they didn't receive as much this year as they thought they could have got. But they also realize that the health of those cattle brings back the same buyer, the same feedlot. And when times are tough, those lots are searching for those cattle. And doing a preconditioning program, they'll say, yes, we can sell our cattle just because they had a good vaccination program. So it does make a difference. And we have a lot of sharp producers. We have a lot of them that have a very sharp pencil. They realize what a good vaccination program does.
Just as a way of thinking about how the supply chain works, any suggestions you'd give to seed stock producers about how they might impact the overall health of cattle in our industry, and potentially how they might impact their customers' behavior in terms of producing an even better product for those of you that are receiving those cattle in the feed yard?
one of the things that that I think we should look at more favorably, as a consumer wants to trace back to the ranch. We've been afraid of that. We've been afraid of that for years. I don't think we have anything to be afraid of. I think we need to get that done. I don't care if you're raising 50 calves or 30 calves. I think you need to have traceback. Eventually, we're going to have to do that if we're going to. Right now, we can sell beef. We can sell beef to about anybody at any price right now. Let that thing turn a little bit, and I would urge you to be prepared to use all the bells and whistles you have to get those cattle as marketable as you can.
Yes. Yes. Yes, I'd agree. People out there need to understand what the consumer wants. And it's not what you want to produce. It's not what the feed yard wants to feed. It's what the consumer wants. So if the consumer's after high quality cattle as a seed stock operator, then I think it's your responsibility to try to get there. And you can get there more than one way, but I think you need to look at that. I think you need to make sure all the health things are done, the bells and whistles are done, less stress as you can on those cattle. And then, if there's any possible way, build a relationship with whoever's feeding those cattle so that you can get that data back and try to improve on what you're doing in your herd. And if you build that relationship with somebody, I think you can get that done. But anything that we can improve, anything that we can make it faster, better, easier, that's how we're going to stay in business.
I think being a seed stock producer at one time, I realized that raising bulls isn't the easiest thing in the world to do. But you have to provide an animal that will go out and work, get those cows bred so that producer can have a calf to sell. Modern transportation has spread genetics all over America. And I think before a bull goes from one destination to another, you need to realize that there's problems, different problems in other areas than where that bull was raised. So take that into consideration. Might have to do a different vaccination program on those few individuals that go that way. The other thing I might say is that EPDs, and I mean the Angus Association, there's nothing or no other breed that'll even come close to accurate, consistent, more information through EPDs going. That is a very, very useful tool. And I think that they need to stay on top of that. I might warn you, don't let the EPDs outrun the cattle, because it's a very good tool, and it's a tool that's being used more and more all the time.
One last question, and sort of a two-parter. In summary, part A, what are the 2 or 3 keys, in your opinion, to assuring a good, sound animal health program? And then the second part is, what are the 2 or 3 things that you hope every producer does with their cattle before they're marketed the first time?
I can hardly remember 3 things, let alone 6. But some of it we've already said. A good, strong vaccination program, 2 rounds of shots. If you want a little more money, you should wean them. And hopefully we will, as an industry, get to there. And what was the next part of that question?
What would be the 3 things that just, if the industry would just always do a couple of things, we would produce a lot better end product in terms of things you should absolutely do before those cattle are sold the first time, and might be beyond the vaccination program?
Well, some of it's repetitive, but I think they should have an individual EID tag in them. I think they should have the right vaccination program. And I think if the opportunity arises to have a relationship with an end user that We'll provide you the information back on your carcass data, how the cattle performed, and make sure that you're using all of the procedures that are accepted by BQA or Progressive Beef or something like that. And that'll really be getting them about where you need them.
I'd have to agree with almost everything you said there. The first thing that I think that producer needs to do is he needs to have the cow and the calf immune system as high as possible so that it will accept the vaccination programs. And I think them animals should be vaccinated. And of course, it's always better to bring a weaned calf in versus a non-weaned calf, but the producer needs to put the economics to that. Things that I think that we need to do to keep a healthy herd is I think we need to stay up on the data that's out there, look at all the new programs that are coming, be sure that we are doing everything right when it comes to needle size, to how you keep it refrigerated, all of that. It's got to be done, and it's got to be done right, and it's got to be done responsible for the people. And then the next thing that I see is follow your cattle through. At least go look at them. See where you can make improvements to make the whole system work better. And go out and tell your story. You know, that's what we got to get. We got to get people like y'all that's in the business, taking care of the cattle, working the ground every day. We got to tell our story.
You know, I think we all have a relationship with our bankers. I think maybe more importantly, you would have a relationship with your vet. I think they could get you on the right track on a vaccination program, what you need to do and when you need to do it. I'm going to take a little different angle on the next question, but I think in a lot of ranches in the Rocky Mountain region, ranch succession is something that we need to really strive for. I remember the man from Guyman, Oklahoma, he said something about the tax break. We need to help that. And the reason I say that is that one, we need the young people there. We need them to stay there. And when they have an interest in the ranch, they seem to do these other programs better. And we need them there. We have too many people that get rid of their cattle. We want people to have a product where they can sell their cattle. And I think that there is a difference, especially in value.
Great summary. Let's thank our panels for their time and their talent and their experience.